Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on application modernization. Um, I'm going to go ahead and get started. As always, please feel free to ask questions using the sidebar over here. And if I see any questions come in mid-webinar, I will be happy to answer them. Please feel free to ask anything with relation to app modernization, and I'll do my best. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Chris Johnson. A little bit about me on the personal side. That is me and my family. I just recently completed a trip to Disney World, so I am exhausted and poor, but I'm here. That's my two boys and my wife over there in front of the Millennium Falcon. Um, I love Star Wars. I love Lego, and I'm a big fantasy baseball nut. Um, on the professional side, I'm the director of business solutions here at Netrix. We are a global consulting firm with a lot of specialization on application modernization and data intelligence. I lead our team called MADI, which is Modern Apps and Data Intelligence. So that's my job here. I've been here about 12 years, and sort of uh, my stats for you: enterprise cloud architect, but came up as a dev and then an architect, and have sort of worked my way into the enterprise cloud architecture design space. So that's why I'm pretty qualified to tell you about app modernization, because it's what I do on a daily basis here, and for a lot of my clients. And I'm excited to talk to you about that today. So let's get moving. Um, we'll talk about what app modernization is. I'm going to try to set the stage, and then probably more importantly, why it's important. And we'll start there, and again, please feel free to chime in with questions if you have them. So I'll do some term definition here. App modernization is the act of updating an organization's apps, data, and processes to use a cloud first approach. So when I say cloud first, doesn't necessarily mean cloud heavy or born in the cloud, but with the ability to at least run in the cloud, and in many cases utilizing cloud services outside of maybe just VMs and containers. The goal of doing this, and we'll dive into this in a little bit, is performance improvement, um, reducing overall operational costs, so cost optimization, an ability to provide a better user experience, both from the standpoint of being able to iterate faster, deliver new features quicker, but also performance, taking advantage of modern tooling. But most importantly, when you look at reasons, compelling reasons to modernize an application, um, outside of all the cost optimization stuff, there is a very good reason to modernize an application if you feel like you can deliver features faster to your customers, and your customers are your end users, right? So sometimes that's internally for an internal business application, or many times it's externally for your clients, or for some level of a product that you actually run and operate. So I'll start talking a little bit more specifically about why you may consider modernizing an application that you consider legacy. So when I say legacy application, first of all, I'm referring to business applications, right? We all have them. If you didn't have any business application that fit some of this mold, you probably wouldn't be here. But when my clients come to me with applications that they say, look, we need to do some level of modernization. These are some of the things that we talk about as potential pains. The biggest one, first and foremost, is this idea that they're really difficult to change. So a lot of times my clients will say, hey, I've got this app and this has been living and breathing for 20 years. And if I even think about trying to change something, the whole Jenga tower is going to fall down. And so, with first of all, that means it becomes expensive to maintain. Maybe there's a really complex code base. Maybe the architecture wasn't designed properly in the first place. Maybe it's just a really old architecture design, so super monolithic, deeply coupled, etc. But then it sort of bleeds into this concept of, well, not only is it taking time and money to keep the lights on, but if I want to change something, if I want to make the application do something new that better supports our business, I can't do it. Or if I can do it, it's expensive, and we're all holding our breath when we hit that deploy button. And that's usually one of the biggest movers. So if that describes you and the application, that you may have in the back of your mind when we start talking about this, it's a good chance that that's a candidate for modernization. There are other reasons. Security and reliability are big ones. Reliability, in terms of keeping the app up and running. It shouldn't be a full-time job for a team just to keep the thing in the air. And where that relates to security is, it doesn't need to be said that there are constantly forces of evil attacking our applications, especially the ones that are some level of external facing or cloud hosted, and they need to be continuously patched. You know that because you hear about it all the time, and because you see your apps get updated all the time. But in order to do that, there has to be a level of operational excellence sitting behind the application that allows you to continually patch it. And so some of these legacy applications, if you have to go and do a very complex deployment every time you want to make an update, what ends up happening is they don't get updated and then they fall out of security compliance. Along the same lines, when we're talking about complex or maybe monolithic architectures, they become difficult to scale. So they're difficult to maintain and patch, but they're also difficult to scale because many times it's a lot more difficult to scale individual components of the application. So maybe you have a very light user base, but you have a very heavy on processing backend. And ideally, you could take some of that processing power and you could scale it to be faster and more efficient without having to scale the lightweight web app that's sitting in front of it. But on more traditional or monolithic designs, that isn't always the case. And so you're sometimes faced with the decision of, if I want to scale this, I need to scale the whole thing at once, and that can become costly, and it can also become something that ultimately prevents you from being able to do that. And then finally, integration and extensibility is a big concern. Modern applications need to all integrate. We're in a world where everything talks to each other, and maybe legacy applications are deeply coupled to something else. Maybe it's SharePoint or SAP or your ERP of choice. If you have really deeply coupled dependencies within this application, instead of the applications being like this, where they can talk to each other, but there's no true dependency, they're actually layered on top like this. And that means when one thing breaks, it all breaks. See my aforementioned Jenga analogy. So that's what a lot of legacy applications look like. What do modern applications look like? Well, first of all, they have a flexible architecture that's backed by an operational excellence, beginning with DevSecOps, and that gives us the ability to deploy frequently. It gives us the ability to deploy new features confidently, to understand what the impact will be, and to have seen that all tested ahead of time. So instead of the Friday night, everyone on the development and business teams are holding their breath when you hit the big red button. You've seen this thing go multiple times, and it's gone through a bunch of tests, and there's no downtime. And with that comes the ability to do, as I said, some of that security patching, zero downtime, right? You can do blue-green deployments. I think a lot of us can remember those days when we would spend weekends trying to just get a deployment right. And when I talk about operational excellence, that supports a level of reliability and security, that's what I'm talking about. DevOps is a big piece of modern applications, and that becomes possible when they're built correctly from the ground up, to be cloud first. On the scalability side, instead of having to scale an entire application, because modern applications are made of multiple components, They can scale up and down as needed. In that case, reducing your actual spend because we call it cost optimized, right? We're putting it on right size infrastructure that can scale with the demand of the application and then scale back down when necessary. So it's kind of a use what you need, don't use it when you don't. Uh, and then finally, modern applications, as we'll talk about in a little bit, are flexible and they're extensible, and they have much more of this type of architecture instead of this one, where they can be integrated safely because they have external facing APIs that are managed in such a way that the APIs can even change on the back end as the application changes. To go with it, and it doesn't break those dependencies that other applications have on yours, nor will your application break when something else changes. So, um, if some of these benefits of a modern application sound appealing to you, let's start talking about what it actually looks like to modernize legacy applications. So this is an approach that we use. It's an approach that was designed and has been tested and proven by Microsoft. Um, and so you'll hear a lot of terminology in here that you'll also hear coming directly from Microsoft. In fact, this is something that they've built an entire offering around. So if you've heard this before and it sounds familiar, that's by design. Um, so here's how we modernize applications, and this is sort of just a high level step by step. The first thing is you have to look at your application inventory, look at your data state, and say, okay, what actually is a good candidate for migration? So the answer may surprise you. It may not always be the most business critical application you have. Obviously, as business criticality increases, so does risk. Um, but typically, um, what we try to identify are the highest impact applications that also, should they be modernized, would provide the biggest benefit to the organization. So when we start to look at our clients' application portfolios, we will typically recommend and sort of order them. Here are the ones that we think make the most sense to target for modernization, in order, right? And then at that point, we have to choose what the right modernization strategy is. And the rest of this conversation is going to be about those various strategies and what options we have to modernize applications. Um, at that point, taking sort of an iterative or agile approach to modernization, depending on the strategy that you choose, is often the best way to handle that, so that as things change, you can adapt, and then certainly you're able to measure the success of the decisions you make. And then finally, given that you've now laid that operational excellence groundwork, you operationalize the application and you're up and running. So let's talk about some of the tech. I'm going to blow right through this pretty quickly because this is deeply technical and that's not really the purpose of this call, of this webinar. However, know that there are lots of tools, and this is certainly not an all-inclusive list. So this is some of the Microsoft Cloud stack on Azure for modern applications, and like I said, there's more, right? But the idea being that many legacy applications are very tightly coupled to a platform, very tightly coupled to a pretty set monolithic architecture. And so when we redesign applications for the cloud, we try to use as many of these tools as makes sense. And sometimes it's only one or two of them, and sometimes it's many of them. And there are reasons that we make those decisions, which will become clear as I talk through some of these other options we have. So when I discuss how we modernize, and this approach, this 6 R's approach, again, this is one sort of coined by Microsoft, but there are 6 different ways that we can modernize a legacy application, and as we move from sort of left to right, or maybe from top, kind of snake down here, they get more and more complex and carry more risk, and therefore potentially can be more expensive. So we'll talk through each one of these. I'm not going to go into them on this slide because I've got one slide for each one. So here is my Simpsons reference for the day. This is actually from the Simpsons movie, if you've not seen it, um, where they put Springfield in a bubble. And this concept of rehosting, We refer to it as sort of lift and shift, is really take everything you have, an application, the entire application landscape, maybe it's 3 servers, a web front end, a back end service, and a database, and package them up as VMs, go put them on the cloud, give them new IPs on your VLAN, and you're done. Everything's working exactly as it was. You move nothing other than all of the earth that's sitting beneath that application. All the plumbing comes with it. Um, very straightforward, very easy to do. Um, Not necessarily the best, and there's really no value to be gained from this other than getting off of your old infrastructure. So that, which may provide value certainly in some cases, but understand that this is a very, very pointed lift and shift, and this is sort of the simplest way of picking up an application and modernizing it, but it also carries with it the fewest benefits, because you don't really get any additional capabilities with the application when you do this. So moving further to the right, the next is this concept of refactoring, or sometimes referred to as repackaging. And if you've ever been driving down the highway and you see one of those caravans of house pieces, um, that's the analogy for this one, is basically pick the house up, ship it somewhere else, reconnect the plumbing, reconnect the electricity, and everything else basically stays as it is. So the idea being maybe just make a couple minimal code changes, but then take your application and containerize it and go host it in something like AKS, your own Kubernetes cluster of choice, and run it, again, without changing very much of it at all. There may be some libraries you have to update to or recompile so that your app can be containerized. But beyond that, we're really not making many changes. Again, minimal work, not quite as small of a lift as the lift and shift to a VM, but also minimal value on the other side. Now, you do potentially gain some scalability if you're hosting something in a container in Kubernetes. But again, if you're just containerizing your application as a whole, there's minimal benefit to doing this, outside of, again, getting off of your on-premises infrastructure and maybe componentizing some of your application. So now we get into some of the more complex pieces, but the ones that provide a little bit more benefit. So here's your Chip and Juliana Gaines approach here. I'm going to remodel, and this may be remodeling a few rooms. And the idea here is, okay, I've got something that works. Some of the house is great, but some of it needs a lot of work. And so we're going to take this room and this room, and we're just going to gut them and remodel them. Not the whole house, but several rooms at a time. And so, maybe you take a piece of the application. For example, maybe you rewrite some of the back end. Maybe you move some of your more traditional data models to a NoSQL model to gain some performance. Or maybe you take one or two pieces of your service layer and implement them as either containers or put them on app service so that they gain a level of scalability. But this requires that you start to do things in a little more modular fashion, and you are breaking apart certain pieces of the application and starting to change them. This is also the first place where you have the ability to introduce new functionality. So everything up until this point, you are really maintaining your existing functionality. There's nothing new being added. Once you get to this point, you have the ability to say, you know what, I want an island here, or I want to add in this chandelier, or I want to knock down this wall. All of that's on the table because we're starting to make code changes. And as we get further to the right of this, it becomes more complex. It also becomes more flexible in the ability to start to make more changes that can be done to suit the needs of your application. And so I call this one out specifically because when we have clients who say, hey, you know what, this app does what it needs to do for the most part, but here are a few major shortcomings that I really wish we could fix. If we get to this point of app modernization, where we need to do some level of replatforming, we now have the ability to make changes to the functional capabilities of the application at the same time. So this is the sort of, hey, remodel a few rooms before you move in approach, and of course is one step above the concept of fully re-architecting, right? Complete gut job, down to the studs. Maybe add a new room, maybe add a new level to the house. When I was 3, we did an addition on an old brick house, so I've seen that happen before. Um, this is where we take the entire application and we pull it apart. And then maybe we keep the front end, right? Maybe the end users don't really see much of a change, but everything else gets completely re-architected and redesigned. So maybe we introduce additional caching. Maybe we introduce a whole new service layer. Maybe we pull the front end and the service layer apart because they were tightly coupled before. Maybe we add in additional caching, new notification systems. Maybe we redesign the whole application to sit on more of an event-driven architecture because that's really how it should be designed, or should have been designed in the first place. This is where we have the opportunity to essentially design the architecture from scratch while keeping some level or shell of the rest of the application, which in many cases is the front end. This is almost the most extreme level of modernization, and sits only lower than this concept of rewriting or rebuilding. So I will often get asked, at what point in time is it right to just start from scratch? When do we bulldoze the thing over, or buy a new plot of land and design this thing from the ground up? And there are reasons to do that. But the two most important reasons to do this are, first of all, if you can confidently say that there's very little ability to build on, extend, or reuse your existing code base for your application. And we have this. I'm working with the client right now where they've got an app. They're in that stuck spot. They can't extend it because it's a bunch of spaghetti code. They really can't move it because it's you can't just go containerize it. It's that Jenga tower, right? You pull one piece out, the whole thing's going to fall over. And so at the same time, it has several functional shortcomings, and that's the other really compelling reason to potentially rebuild. If you don't have a foundation that's usable and you have very little value that you are gaining from the application as it is, to the point where your business is starting to be bottlenecked by the fact that you cannot improve upon this application, that's when you should consider doing a full rewrite. And the idea here is that we approach this functionally. Start from scratch. What does this thing need to do? Go build a backlog. If you're familiar with agile development, this is where you would essentially build your entire functional backlog at a feature level and then start implementing so that you can deliver an MVP iteratively. Certainly on the most expensive end of the spectrum, right? And almost barely falls in the column of modernization because you really are building from scratch. The only thing that sort of lives on from the previous application is what it does functionally. Other than that, this is a completely brand new product. And again, with that, you gain all of the other capabilities. You also, in many cases, gain the ability to sort of learn, um, and introduce some leading practices to your dev team. So again, a lot of my clients will come to me and say, look, we've with your help figured out we need to rebuild and basically rewrite this thing. Can you, as part of that, introduce best practices around operational excellence? Can you help us deliver agile? Can you help us implement DevSecOps? All of these things can be done as part of a modernization practice, but can be really learned by your team when you do a full rewrite. The last option that you have, and certainly one not to be overlooked, is that of what is essentially a replacement. Buy something off the shelf. The analogy here is you purchase builder grade new construction. It's cookie cutter. You make a couple decisions about configuration, but anything else you need to do is going to be some level of customization or extension that you're building to suit. Um, and this is go buy an off-the-shelf product, right? And I will encourage all of my clients to do that buy versus build analysis before you really pull the trigger on something, maybe as complex or expensive as a rebuild. So this is always an option. There are any number of off-the-shelf products that will meet your business needs at a high level, but there are almost no off-the-shelf products that are going to meet your business needs 100%. And so this is an exercise in finding, can we hit that middle ground where this hits maybe 80% of what we need and then customize the other 20%, and then engage a dev firm like ours to go and get you that other 20% of the way. Certainly the risk here is you are then once again sort of tied to a platform moving forward. And that's just something that you have to discuss going into this decision, because ultimately with the cost savings that comes from using something off the shelf, which can be significant. There also, comes additional OpEx with licensing. There also comes maybe some limitations along the lines of um, flexibility to enhance or extend for your business needs. So what happens after we get through the analysis phase? Well, then we build, right? And when I'm looking at an application modernization process, the very first thing we have to do, as I mentioned, is build that inventory of applications and then look at the ones that we deem most critical and or the best candidates for migration. And then as part of an assessment, we will sort of place them on the spectrum. So this is something that we do. It's something that we often partner with Microsoft to do with Microsoft's clients, which means sometimes we're able to secure some funding from Microsoft to do it, because we've shown the ability to deliver this in the past. So if you have gone through this webinar and the light bulbs are going off and you're like, yes, this is me, this totally is something that we should consider, because we're having a lot of that pain of not really being able to build on or extend this app or help it meet our business needs. I'd encourage you to look into an application modernization assessment that Netrix can provide. And this is something that, as I mentioned, we may be able to deliver at minimal, if not no cost to you, with some support from Microsoft. So as part of these, we will go through and help you identify those candidates for modernization. We will then, based on how many there are and how much scope there is there, we can provide migration strategy for you, along with at least a high level estimate and a high level architecture to actually do that implementation for you. And again, we are able to do that in partnership with Microsoft, so that you can be assured that this is done to best practices. Now, if you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, but I'm probably going to end up on that realm of rebuild all the way over to the right side of the spectrum, one additional option that you have is what we call our springboard. And this could be coupled with an application modernization assessment. It may be something that we start with depending on where we think you fit on that spectrum. This is us coming in. It's an investment on our end to say this is a big lift. We know that we're going to end up likely in some level of a rewrite or rebuild. And so we do what we call a springboard, and we try to document as much of the business requirements as we can within a 2 to 4, sometimes 8-hour segment. From this comes a backlog that we can then size to give you an implementation budget recommendation, which you can then use to make some decisions about whether this is something you want to bite off right now. And then of course we can do the build and implementation and launch and measure. So I hope that this has been valuable to you. I do appreciate your attendance and attention during this webinar. I'll give you one pitch for Netrix, my company. We are very much in bed with Microsoft over here. We deliver on a number of Microsoft technologies. We have a number of specializations, and we really go to market um, as a one-stop shop for all of your information technology needs, whether that's custom development on the application side, whether it's data intelligence, modern work and collaboration, or certainly in cloud infrastructure and governance. We also are a well recognized partner in the area of cybersecurity, um, which sort of encompasses everything in that realm. So, again, thank you for your time. At this point, I'm going to open it up for some questions. And I did have a couple sent in to me ahead of time from some clients as well. So I'll answer those here. We just have a few minutes left. Let's see. Are cloud first applications always less expensive to run? No, no, not necessarily. Um, So, some apps can, of course, run on infrastructure that is essentially sunk cost, right? So, that CapEx was from years ago. There's minimal OpEx to maybe keep the lights on, but, some of these applications are well-oiled machines, and running them on premises isn't the worst thing. They cost less. Where that can become expensive is when you require an inordinate amount of engineering and support team to keep those lights on, or a large and expensive development effort just to make minor enhancements. So, run cost is not just infrastructure. In fact, certainly if you own the infrastructure, it is likely going to be cheaper to run it on premises. That said, when you're building modern applications, you can also sort of beg, borrow, and steal just pieces of infrastructure that you need, right? So you don't need to go stand up an entire server to do something. You can just use a shared instance of something to reduce cost. Where do low code and no code platforms come into the picture? Okay, so low code and no code, and I'll talk on the Microsoft realm here, Power Apps and Power Automate. Power Portals, I think, is the other one. Once we get to the point where we are recommending some level of rewrite, so we're further on on the right side of that spectrum that I showed you, where we're not just going to lift and shift it. That's where low code, no code may play as one or multiple components of the modern application. So, low code and no code does, in many cases, sort of tightly couple some of the business logic in the front end. So you have to walk a pretty fine line there. So what we'll typically do is do some analysis on, how big is this thing really? And there typically is a very clear line where building on top of low code and or no code can provide benefit and a long-term benefit. Um, Typically one where we want to be able to deliver something quickly and iteratively. But in the case of much larger, heavier applications, that the low code, no code pieces will then become much more complex quickly. So the answer is they come into play once we start getting into any level of re-architect or rebuild, but they have a specific purpose, and you have to be careful to not over customize on that end, because that's not what those tools were designed to do. Are there tools that can modernize applications automatically? Yes, there are. It's not so cut and dry. So on that left side of the spectrum, where you're just lifting and shifting or repackaging, there are lots of tools that will do that for you, and they make that pretty straightforward, because there's really not a lot going on behind the scenes, right? In many cases, being able to do that is, yeah, we use tools for that because it's easier, it's faster, and it's cheaper. As you start to move further to the right, there really is no magic bullet, right? You can't just click a button and all of a sudden your monolithic web app written in, whatever ASP forms, is suddenly running as a microservices based application written in React, right? There's no magic button that does that. So as you get further to the right of that spectrum, you are certainly going to be relying on much more custom development and expertise. Hopefully that answers the question. Any more questions? Any follow-ups? Okay, well, if you have any additional questions, certainly feel free to contact me. We have a link in the documents or attachments section over here that'll take you out to our website where you can find out more information about application modernization and our unique approach to that. So, thank you again, everyone, for your time. I really appreciate it. This is Chris Johnson signing off, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks.